3 marathon PB attempts in 4 months. Not many people would try this, but this man did, and he succeeded. And that man we're talking about today is Ben Felton, aka Ben is running on social media. Now Ben's marathon history is as follows. Copenhagen Marathon back in May 2022. He ran a 2:28 debut marathon. Fast forward to Valencia at the end of 2022 and he ran a disappointing 2:37 in his eyes. He went out and he went for that PB, but the stars did not align that day. Fear not though, because he ran Osaka Marathon 2 months later in February and ran a PB 2:28 again, and followed that up with a Boston Marathon performance of a lifetime, 2:24. So just like we did with Stephen Scullion, we'll be diving into the final 8 weeks of Ben's training leading up to that magical 2:24 run at Boston, share with you some insights. Well, we'll share the training and then at the end we'll share the insights as to what we learned and what I've picked out as some key points to his training. So a quick reminder of the colour coding here. I've marked the lighter green stuff as easy runs, the darker green stuff as what I've classed as steady run, and that again is based on heart rate, very similar to what I did with Stephen Scullion, and it's just based on something decent in the 140s and over. Obviously I don't know Ben's zones and stuff, so take it with a pinch of salt, but I just want to mark it down there. You'll see why I've done it later on. And these white ones are sessions, so it just gives you an idea as to the way Ben has structured his week. And in this first week, let's do the first 2 weeks first. He races a marathon PB in Osaka. So this first week is easy run, 5 miles, 6:40 per mile, heart rate 130, nice and calm heart rate there. He then does a workout 5 days out, 2.5k warm up, 5k at marathon pace, 2.5k warm down. So he's done 10k there, which is great. He then does what I've classed as a steady run, although I'd say he's probably gone and done that as an easy, but I've just marked that based on the heart rate. You can see on Monday there he's run 6:40 per mile with a heart rate of 130, and here 6:56 with a heart rate of 146. Now heart rate data, there could be dodgy stuff. I haven't got time to go into each one and see if there are any glitches with the heart rate, so I'm just taking it on face value. I'd assume that he's intended to do an easy run there. I believe this was a travel day to Osaka. He's done a shakeout there, as you can see, shakeout on the travel, a very small shakeout, some treadmill strides. He's rested the day before Osaka and then he's gone and run a 2:28.19, unbelievable. So he goes and runs that on the Monday. He then has a very low-key week the next week. He marked down a 0.2 of a mile run home from the shop to see, I don't know why he did that, but anyway, he marked that down. He then did an elliptical work on the Wednesday. He rested Thursday, Friday, Saturday and did his first run on the Sunday to wrap up his first 2 weeks of this block. So then we move on to the next 2 weeks, and what I should say, and what I missed here, if we go back up here, look, I've marked Kenya. So at that point, that first run back, Ben then travelled to Kenya for 2 weeks. So these next 2 weeks are in Kenya. And this first week, I'm gonna take with a bit of a pinch of salt because he's obviously being guided by the tour group that he was on. So you can see here, there's like 3 days in a row where he does some decent work. So let's cover it. So he does a group run and some core on the Monday. And his heart rate's nice and low there, so nice and relaxed. You'll see his paces are a lot lower now he's at altitude. He then does a first mini session, 12 by 100 meters with a 100-meter float on the track. And then he does a double, so he does an easy double in the evening, heart rate 138, so that's nice and calm, and a very mini session. He then does a progression run on the Wednesday, which is decent. The heart rate's 158, so he's really working. Again, that's altitude. I'm sure if he did that down at sea level, back where he lives, the heart rate wouldn't be that high, and it probably would have been a steady run. But the heart rate was up there, so it's kind of the stimulus there is pushing into that tempo area. And then he does another easy double with Kush in the evening, heart rate 142, so he's done a nice double day there. He then does the Kenyan fartlek, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen on YouTube. They head out to a road, a rolling road, and they don't know what they're doing until they rock up, and it's either 1 minute, 2 minute, or 3 minute fartlek workout. And on this occasion, it was 11 by 3 off 1 minute jog. So he did that. That was his first introduction into some good Kenyan running, I should say. Then the next day, a recovery run with some core, and then another easy run, so a nice relaxed day on the Friday. And then on the long run on the Saturday, he does, let's have a look, because I did keep some of his notes in there. So he obviously drove somewhere from Iten, forgot his HR strap, and did just over 15 miles with a warm down. And then he did an afternoon walk, so he got some good mileage bank there. He rested on Sunday, and as you can see there, he covered 75 miles. Moving on to the next week, he starts it off with a 70-minute easy run. and then another easy double later. I've marked it in the steady colour because his heart rate on the 70 minutes was 149, and as he mentions here, it turned into a progression, which, as he said, and I've heard a lot about Kenyan runners, they like to turn some of their easy runs into progression. So I've marked it as a steady, but the evening is definitely an easy. Plus he then did some core. Then he did a session on the Tuesday, Kipchoge track session, 10 by a K. He then did an easy shakeout in the evening, heart rate 123. I marked that down as a fitness jump. That's a crazy low heart rate. The pace is the same as what he did last week, so I'm going to assume he might start to be adjusting to altitude there. He then does an easy double on the Wednesday. The Thursday, he does another workout, but it's a long run, so very similar to what he did the previous week on the Saturday, I should say. Again, he covered around 15.5 miles, and then he did what he's labelled as a Kenyan shuffle, nice easy jog with some drills in a session. I remember all this being filmed on YouTube, so that was cool. And then he did a nice easy run on the Friday, and then one last 1 hour progression run, his last run in a 10, wrapping up the week at 81 miles, resting on the Sunday. Now this is where things get interesting, because we'll do the next 2 weeks, and these are when he's back at home. So he obviously travelled on the Sunday, and we'll talk about why it's interesting at the end here. So he starts off with a 20k progression run, and gets his heart rate down to 149. I remember the comment on this one being he's training still like he's in Kenya, so he did a little progression run there. Heart rate was 149, so I marked it as a steady run. He obviously got into a good rhythm there, and then his an easy double in the evening with some core work, so I marked it as a steady, easy day. We'll have to ask Ben what his zones are and everything, but for me, 149 definitely, for most people, that's getting in towards the steady zone. And then he does a workout on the Tuesday, a really good workout to be fair to him, but it's a single day, so he doesn't double that day. And then he does a double easy day, I should say. So he does 12 miles in the beginning and then a 7-mile progression. And again, I've marked it as easy steady because that heart rate on the first one is really low. On the second one is quite high. So he's done that whole progression thing again. Again, this one here, it was a very nice low key, easy run. He was doing a shoot with Pro Direct running, so he didn't get much mileage covered that day. Heart rate was 142 despite the low pace. He was obviously doing some kind of film work there. And then he chucks in a beast of a workout, a really, really good marathon workout. Covers 20 miles. This is on the Friday, 7 by 3K. Amazing. Heart rate really controlled, really good. This is where you can see his fitness shine through. Such a low heart rate for such a big distance and pace covered. And then he does a park run. He notes it down as a park run with an Aussie. The Strava description, there's more in there to it. He obviously like warms up to park run, does a hard park run, and then warms back, cools down back home. And he covers nearly 17 miles. So he's done 2 really long runs back to back. That is about 37 miles over the 2 days, roughly. And then he rests on the on the Sunday, meaning he covers 87.5 miles. And then we move into this week, and he's mentioning calf pain. So he's obviously picked up a bit of a niggle here. I don't actually know why I've marked this one down as an easy run, to be honest, but it is, the heart rate is 148. So he's done a treadmill progression, I think, or a treadmill run. 148 heart rate, so debatable as to what that is. And then the next day he does a steady run with a few hill sprints, calf pain 2 out of 10. So he's obviously making a note of it. And then he does 45 minutes elliptical. He's mentioned there, work is work, no doubles until niggle free. So he's obviously he's aware of it, and he knows what is coming. And then the next day he goes and does 15 by a K with Nick Bester. So again, another social media chap there. I'm sure a lot of you know about Nick. He's got a YouTube channel as well. So Ben goes to Battersea Park and runs 15 by a K with him. That comes up to around 14.5 miles or just over. Amazing. He then travels to Paris for the marathon, but doesn't run it. So he does some easy work over the next 3 days. All of this is marked down as easy. He's got a longish 12.5 mile run. He's then got a double run here on the Friday, and then a nice morning shakeout on the Saturday, resting on the Sunday, meaning he covers 63 miles. And then we move on to the final 2 weeks, and you can see on the screen here, there's not a lot of easy stuff going on in these last 2 weeks. So this is really interesting. So he does 5k with 5 strides in the morning, so he's obviously doing an easy run. And then he does in the evening 10 miles, marathon pace, 5 miles, half marathon pace, so he covers 15 miles. I believe that was on the treadmill. And again, I just want to highlight here, fitness levels. You can see he's really got himself into some good shape. 5:18 per mile average, heart rate 157, wonderful stuff. He then does an easy double on the Tuesday, and then he's got 8 by a mile on the Wednesday, which is a decent session. Again, look at that heart rate, 150 overall, wonderful stuff, off 60 seconds, so very controlled. He rests on the Thursday. He then does a 5K race. I was there, I filmed it, Bristol Track Club, 14:43. Incredible. I was there, I witnessed it. He ran amazingly. In a field amongst pros, he came out on top. He did so well. I can't remember his exact placing, but I'm sure it was top 10 or pretty close to top 10. He did really well. So that was a Friday. He then took an easy day the next day, and then he just did strength and conditioning core on the Sunday. 57 miles covered that week. So in that 2 weeks before the race, what I would say is 3 intense workouts, the Monday, the Wednesday and the Friday. And then on the Monday, he does 4x4 miles almost. He bailed on the last one, I believe. I think he was meant to do 5. I remember watching, reading the Strava description. He did 4 just to be safe. Covered 14 miles, still 5:16 per mile. Incredible stuff. Recovery day the next day with some core, rested Wednesday, and then this was really interesting because he did his last mini session, 5K at marathon pace, 5 days out from Boston, I think it was a 4. And I put a note in here when I looked at it. It was very close to being goal pace. So he averaged 3:23 and his actual race pace at Boston was 3:25. So he really pretty much nailed that. He knew where his fitness was at. So massive respect for that session. Rested on the Friday, did a shakeout. Well, he flew, I think that was his travel day. He did a shakeout on the Saturday. He did another shakeout with Seftamore on the Sunday. He covered 33 miles on the in that week. And then on the Monday, which is the day of Boston Marathon, he ran 2:24, 5:29 per mile, 3:25 per K. And yeah, dream race, Heartbreak Hill, got nothing on me. Flipped the bird, found my happy place at the finish line. He had one heck of a day, 2:24.46 and heart rate 177. So what I do want to say just before I give you some takeaway thoughts on his training in general is that we've just taken a look at a snapshot, which is the last 8 weeks leading up to his PB. You've got to remember that the man trained for 3 marathons leading up to this. Well, he did 3 marathons, I should say, in 4 months. So he had a lot of training under his belt. And in particular, he had a really good stint of training between Valencia and Osaka, really peaking at some good mileage. So the thoughts that I'm about to give you in these last 8 weeks, you have to take into consideration the fact that he's already stacked up a ton of miles leading up to this point, and he was probably in really good shape bouncing off the back of Osaka. So let's dive into what I think about it. Now, I had 3 questions coming off the back of checking out his training, and I'm going to go through what they are now because Ben, being the gentleman that he is, volunteered his time to record a couple of clips for this video to answer my questions. I reached out to him and said, look, I've done a video like this on Stephen's training. I'd love to do it on yours. Do you mind? Is that okay? And he said, yeah, and do you want, if you've got any questions, mate, just ask. So I've sent him the following 3 questions for him to answer. They are, number 1, double threshold training. I know he's a big advocate of double threshold training, and I know he'd done some before, but I saw none of it during this last 8 weeks. So I just asked the question. The obvious thing there is Kenya takes up 2 weeks of that, but in the final sort of 4 or 5 weeks, there was none of it. So I was curious to know his thoughts on that. The second question I had was the intensity in the final 2 weeks was quite high with 3 workouts. 4 workouts, I should say, in a 7-day period, the Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Monday within that final 2 weeks. So I asked him his thoughts on that. And the final thing I asked was, did he feel the 2 weeks at Kenya made any difference in terms of the altitude? Obviously, if you follow him, you'll know he's been in Kenya for the last sort of like 6 weeks and he's recently come back. So I appreciate that length of block is going to do the world of good for any athlete. But for 2 weeks, did he find a difference? I know he adapted to altitude towards the end of the training block, at the end of the 2 weeks, I should say, but I wondered if he felt any difference when he came back and leading into Boston. Did it have any effect on him, or did he just feel like it was another standard 2 weeks training?
Hi Andy, hope you're well. First of all, thanks for doing this. I think it's cool that you're having a little look into my training before the Boston Marathon. I can't even remember what my training looked like myself, so I'm looking forward to watching the video. But I thought I would just answer a few of your questions here in the beautiful sunny Valencia. Yeah, so for me, I found that threshold or double threshold training works best for sort of the 5 and 10k distance. So when I train more for the marathon, I tend to do one sort of longer session per week, at a slightly lower intensity than my threshold. So for example, one of those sessions will be 15 by 1k at marathon pace, or 7 by 3k. And I just find those sort of longer sessions are a little bit more effective and more specific towards marathon training than, say, the double threshold, which I find is more suited to my 5 and 10k races. Yeah, so in my training blocks, I tend to structure them so that when I start to taper, the intensity increases ever so slightly. So as my overall volume comes down, say 3-4 weeks out from the marathon, I tend to increase the intensity of my sessions a little bit. I just find it makes me sharpen up a little bit when it comes to the race. So sessions like 8 by a mile, slightly quicker than marathon pace, just gets me confident that I can run at my marathon pace, and it tends to make it feel a little bit easier for me. So as I start to taper in terms of overall volume, I increase the intensity ever so slightly, and I've just found that's what works for me and makes me feel confident and fresh when it comes to the race. So overall volume goes down, but the intensity increases ever so slightly. Hence why you see quite a lot of rest days, but those sessions just increase a little bit in terms of speed. Yeah, so in terms of the training camp I did in Kenya, the 2 weeks, I would say that it wasn't quite long enough in terms of getting the sort of altitude benefits, so the increased level of red blood cells, for example. I didn't necessarily feel any fitter when I returned, but what it did sort of get me in a good routine of is doing things like my recovery, eating well, doing my doubles, everything that you need for a good marathon build. I sort of kick-started in Kenya, and then I carried on when I returned. So for example, one thing I really tried to do in my Boston Marathon build was to clean up my diet, just try and cut the amount of saturated fat that I was consuming, and I didn't eat sweets, chocolates, alcohol, anything like that in the sort of 6 to 8 weeks building up to Boston. And I think training in Kenya for 2 weeks at the very start of the training block really set me off in a good sort of training habit for the rest of the block. So I wouldn't say I necessarily benefited from the altitude, but in terms of getting in a good routine, getting stuff like my core into my weekly schedule was really fundamental in the build up to Boston. So yes and no is the answer. Thanks, Andy. Look forward to watching the video when it comes out, and I'll speak to you soon, mate. Bye-bye.
So what a hero. Massive thanks to Ben once again for letting me do this and his training. He puts it all out there on Strava, and I'd have probably done it anyway, but it was just nice to ask him and to get him involved in this. It's just, I appreciate it so much. And obviously, Ben, if you're watching, mate, best of luck in Valencia 10K this weekend. And to all of you who've watched this, I think I'm going to mention it now. If you want to see me analyse anybody else's training that's on Strava, do drop a comment below. And if there's anyone that gets some really big votes and everyone's really interested in, or if there's a name that keeps popping up, I'd love to do it, and I'll just jump on board and I'll see if I can do some more people's training. But that's it for this episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed me analysing Ben's final 8 weeks leading up to Boston Marathon. 3 marathon PB attempts in 4 months, and he did it on the second and third attempt technically, but a whopping 2:24, 4 minutes off on that third one. That's it from me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving it a like, share it with your friends, and of course subscribe to the channel for weekly running content. I'll see you on the next one. Until then.